Alright, in this video we're going to have a look at markup, tax, and how to get breakdowns of your different price items. So that includes seeing the markup and tax breakdown, but also being able to see how the items are broken up as far as labor items versus material versus equipment, etc. So flipping over to my Buildxact account over here, first of all we're going to go through the markup one, and generally speaking there's three ways you can add markup, referring to the different levels that we can put it within our estimate. So if I go into here and just use any old line as an example, we have what we call estimate level markup, which refers to a markup that you apply at the estimate level, and that just blanket covers everything. We have what we call category level markup, which blanket covers everything in that category only. And then we have line item or item level markup, and that applies only to that one item. If you use more than one of those together, which there is completely valid reasons to do this. So let's say I go in here and I go markup 20%, whatever you want. Note, while you're here, you can adjust the rounding on the final figure. We do get that question a little bit. Where is that option? It's in here. If I put 20% over here, it's just going to go whatever that subtotal is, 20% of it. And it will show the breakdown, which we'll get into more in this item here. But if I was to say, hey, I've got that 20%, and what's a good example? Let's say I get a quote from an electrician and I look at it and I go, feels a bit low. Either I've got a really good deal, or maybe he's forgotten a few things, or it just is low, and I want to add a bit of contingency to it. You can add markup to this line here, which then takes me onto that breakdown I was talking about, because you can click on here and it's saying the $15,713, which is effectively the client's price or the sell price, as opposed to this one, which is your raw cost. So the way we got from 11 to 15, if you click in here, you can see how it's done its thinking. 11,000 plus 2750 of markup. Redistribution, there's a whole other video for it, but the very short version is we do a fancy thing called redistribution, which is where we move markup in relation to allowance items. And you will see in here if an item has received markup from another item. But I won't go into depth here. If you want to know more about it, there's a whole other video just around the redistribution and how it works. So that gets us to this total, 1428, and we put some tax on it, and that gets us to our 15.7. Specifically though, if I go show breakdown for markup, you can see I've got 550 of item level, which is my 5% that I put on this item, and I got $2,200 of estimate level, which is my 20%. The main thing I'm trying to point out here, if you remember nothing else from this, is if you do have multiple of those different markup levels together, they double stack, even triple stack if you have all three. So really just to say, be careful of that. It's not the worst thing in the world if you add it and you win the job and then you realize you've got more markup than you thought, but it is a bad thing obviously if it causes you to lose the job. Anyway, that's the legitimate use case for double stacking, sometimes even triple stacking, and how the markup works. We've had a look at the breakdown and how that shows, and then the client sell price in here. The other things we need to look at are the tax, which is this guy here. Basically put, everything's going to be 10% unless you tell us otherwise. If I go in here and change it to 0%, what it will do is obviously make that 0%. So if I go back into this, everything's calculated per line. So this now has no tax. And if you pulled out your calculator, you would notice that the overall tax on the entire estimate now is slightly less than 10%, because what we essentially do is we add all the tax up. So if there is 100 items and 99 of them have tax and one doesn't, then there's a slight bit less tax than the total 10%. One thing that's definitely worth pointing out at this point is we take all of the estimate data and we push it through to invoicing. So we sometimes get the question from people, hey, I'm going to invoice my client and your calculation isn't right because my GST is less than 10%. And it's because people had tax-free items to begin with. And essentially what you're doing when you're building an estimate is you're building, or pre-building if you like, the invoices to your customer because you're figuring out the income that you're going to make later on. So just be really aware that when you turn tax off, it's to do with the tax that you are charging the client, not in this case the tax that you're going to pay for an item. That relates to the purchasing section. So if you still need to charge the client tax for something, but you can buy it tax-free, you should still have tax on this, is the long and short of it. Lucky last is you can click on anything blue. I'm sure you've heard this a few times from our videos, like notes or this or the sell prices or markup or subtotal. Subtotal is an interesting one. I really like pointing this out. If you click on it, it will calculate all of the types. And this is super useful for people who go, hey, generally I'll do a quote, a budget or a quote, and I'll look at it. And, you know, for me, it should be that labor is X% of my material, or I should have roughly allowed this much, subcontractor versus labor. Like they know roughly the portions that they want to have, and they can compare it this way. So this is cool, just being able to check it. And you can also do things like electrician, show the breakdown just for that category. So it's just bulk click 23 things. And now it's doing that same comparison, but just for electrician. You could do the same thing just by selecting 3 lines and clicking the button. So really just to know, you can pick whatever you want, tell us to show the breakdown, and we will give you that breakdown. Awesome. As always, hope that's been helpful. Any questions, let us know.